the recording, so I hope that's okay with everyone.
Got it. Right, I've got to hit got it.
And I'm just going to put myself. I'm going to introduce you, and then I'm going to put myself on silent because someone
Sure.
is trying to contact me. So welcome everyone. Carla from the Coaching Directory, Lena, who has got an accounting firm, I think it is Lena. Yep, and Christine Williams, who's a property advisor. And runs property investment business. So you kind of have a bit of an idea about everyone who's here. Let me introduce you to the amazing Denise Hall, who we all want to know, because Denise will work with you from the setting up of your business if you want to sell it, right the way through to when you want to sell it at the end. She is a business broker, so she sells businesses. She works on strategies because, she's, I'm no doubt going to tell us there's a whole lot of things you need to put in place really before you sell to maximize the price. She's a speaker, she's a coach, I think, amongst all those things. So over to you, Denise.
Thank you very much. And hello all. If I haven't, hello Lauren. I just see Lauren's popped in. I do know Lauren. So I'm going to share a screen. That, as I said to you, the slides are there for my benefit as much as anyone else's. So if there is something you want to discuss or a question you want to ask, if you put a question in the chat though, Jules, can you monitor that? Because I'm not very good at it. I'll just keep talking. So unless I'm directed otherwise, that's what I'll do. All right, let me share the screen. All right, can you all see that? Now. Yeah, okay. So what I thought would be useful is that whole discussion about, rather than even, look, what a business is worth will be part of it, but this notion of actually building something that you could sell, yeah, that someone, and more importantly, that someone wants to buy. Two kind of different considerations. Oh, that one's not working. That one is, no, that one is. All right, I've sorted myself out now, I think. Okay, so quick disclaimer, general in nature. If you want to know anything specific, come, by all means. And I do want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. All right, so building a saleable business. So in terms of background to me, how is it that I know what I know? Key thing here is this business, ACE Talent Net in the middle. I owned that. I operated that for 14 years and I took it to market. It was doing 7 figures at time of going to market, so it was too big, had staff, couldn't just pack it away with the toys. So had to go to market, and then the GFC hit. Took way longer than it should have to then sell, but we did eventually sell. That whole, and that GFC situation's actually been quite useful to address what's also happening within the COVID scenario in recent times.
The current recession.
That we're not having.
Yeah.
And what I'd spend my day now doing is I do appraisals on approximately 100 businesses per year, all different shapes, sizes, and industries, as well as facilitating the actual sale deals for both vendors, sellers, and liquidators.
Amazing.
A little bit about exclusive. We're a national brokerage, and that's what appeals to a lot of the vendors that work with us, because we are national. So we're not just your local trying to sell it local. We have an extensive spread, and we do deal transactions up to the $20 million mark. But essentially, as a broker, we're kind of the glue that holds the deal together, because the seller has engaged us to sell the business, but we have to get to know the buyer equally as well to be able to know how the transaction can actually work. But as importantly, we bring market evidence to bear. And this is a key point when talking with anyone who professes to know about business sales and what's happening in the market. The key question is, what experience do they actually have in playing in the space? Because market evidence, as in what's actually happening in the market, not stuff you can Google and find out general stories about, is actually really important. So what I like to ask owners is how ready is the owner themselves about selling the business, regardless of what the business is in and of itself, right? because every owner wants their business to be their golden ticket. And so do I, but the reality is many are not. And this is why I actually want this discussion to happen way earlier than it typically does. And the reason for that is because if you only find out what your business is worth when you're ready to go and it's nowhere near where you want it to be, I see too many tears. It's not good, right? So knowing what the business is worth and what you're aiming for and how to get there and all the rest of it plays a really important part. Stop me at any time, by the way, as well.
Yep.
The other thing is business is personal. Do not believe, bollocks about it's just numbers, it's just transactions, it's just this, it's just that. At some level, it is one of the reasons why you do what you do. It's why you get out of bed. And what I know, and I have seen it more than once, where deals are sabotaged, is because the owner hasn't got anything to replace this with. And if you are driven by this, something like this, you need to have a replacement before we start going down this path. That it's actually really important and no one talks about it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Now, in terms of can you afford to sell, this is another consideration that we raise with owners. I don't want to know detail, but I ask the questions because here's the thing. If the business is saleable and it's worth an amount of money that you're prepared to sell, which is that middle column, the other two considerations are, if that is your cash flow, have you invested money, parked money, put money into assets that are going to provide the cash flow that you are about to sell, which is column 1.
Yeah.
Which goes to the question of, can you actually afford to sell? You might want to, but can you afford to? Have you set up life outside of this transaction that enables you to do that? And the other thing, which I was just alluding to, is this notion of what will you do outside of the business to replace this? Obviously, the ideal answer is this yes in all columns.
Yep.
Otherwise, there's work to do. And I don't know many people that can tick yes in all columns. And if you can, all hail to you.
Okay.
Owners typically sell for 3 reasons. Payday, the financial consideration, it's always the one we lead with, and it's the one that's most tangible, and it's the one that we can put some logic and some numbers around. The other 2, I can't put any value on, but they are equally as important. Freedom being you want the business to continue, you just don't want to be the one continuing it. And then that plays into legacy as well. You want the business to continue, you want the staff to look after, you want your clients to be looked after, you want, you put a lot of effort into building this thing, you want it to continue. But again, you don't want to be the one to continue it. But I can't put any monetary value on legacy and freedom, but they are really, really important for you to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Then the question about how long this exit strategy takes. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule, but if I just talk generally, if your business is not ready to take to market tomorrow, it could take a year, 2 years to get it in line, and or if your financials aren't supporting the price you want, but could support the price you want, we need a couple of years of financials to do that, right? So let's just say we allow 2 years to get ready. Let's say we allow a year for the transaction to happen. So it's often less, but let's just allow a year. And then allow 2 years, because if it's a professional service business, for example, there's a high chance that you will be expected to go with the sale, especially if you as the owner is still centre of attention. So you can add another year or 2 on that. So just as a generalisation, you're looking at a 5-year mix here for you to walk out and walk away completely.
Yeah.
This is really important in terms of your own consideration. When do you want to go to market? When do you want to be out? Why do you want to be out? Is it a number? Is it a birthday? Is it a date? Is it a whatever? And work backwards from there, because then you'll know when you need to start pursuing this and understanding it. I noticed there's 2 comments in the chat. Did you want to have a look at that?
Oh, I was going to do that at the end, but I can.
Okay, that's fine. That's
It's
fine.
all right.
I don't mind if it's on the way through.
No,
Whatever.
it's just all we've got. Someone's just come back from the gym, and you're posing some excellent questions.
Oh, I'm pleased.
So don't worry, and we'll do the rest of them at the end.
Excellent. All right. So and in terms of exit strategies to then even be considered, right? So for the most part, owners do understand that it's a trade sale, but not all. You know, there's conversations around management buyout, private equity, IPO, right? The key thing is that a trade sale is often the only way out in some respects. Management buyouts, look, we've seen them tried. Sometimes they don't work. And often from a management buyout point of view, the management team or the staff team that want to take it on, they're employees for a reason.
Yeah.
And this notion of business ownership it's not the same as being an employee. You know, you don't knock off, you carry stuff home, you sleep with it, right?
It's easy to stand on the outside and go, oh, I can do what they're doing.
You know, surely it can't be that hard. Well,
Yeah.
you know, it's not. And not, unfortunately, we see those fall apart. Not all, but we do see that. From a private equity and IPO perspective, in terms of business, this 2.5 million businesses in Australia, 93% of those are doing a $2 million or less turnover.
Yeah.
ABS stats. Of those 93%, private equity and IPO won't look at them. They're too small.
Right.
Right? Family succession, it's absolutely a way of exiting, but I don't know many family members that would then want to pay their parents for taking over the business.
Yeah.
So there has to be a whole different conversation and way of being able to extract value out of them to be able to go off and, you know, ride off into the sunset, etc. So a number of the exit strategies, and you know, that they may not have investigated them very much, but a number of them aren't actual ones that will work for them, depending on the size of the business and what, you know, what it's doing, and etc. The other thing that I find curious is this likelihood of who is likely to buy your business. Now, there are exceptions to the rule, but certainly in my experience of 13 years, competitors don't typically buy businesses. Not at the premium, not at the price that we want to sell them for.
I thought this chart was saying people that do buy the businesses, but what you're saying is this is what we all think, but it's not true. This is what we think. Okay.
Right? Because it makes sense. I will often have an owner come to me and say, I know exactly who will buy this. Yeah, no, you don't. But they do, because they think this is correct, right? So-and-so, we've been dealing with them for years, or, you know, they're a competitor. I know they want to take us on because of our client list, etc., etc. That may very well be the case, but often they don't want to pay a premium for it. They want to cherry pick. They just want the database. They just want this. They just want that. They don't want the whole thing lock stock. And they're certainly not paying the price that any goodwill in that, generally speaking, right? Other unsure, not so much. Private equity, again, too small. The majority of businesses are too small. Some do go to private equity firms. Some we're even seeing, you know, very small funds where mates are getting together, almost abandoning this notion of pooling funds and going into business ownership. So we're seeing variations on that theme. Sometimes a supplier, but they can be considered similar to a competitor.
Yeah.
Ones that we see where the sale works very, very well is where they are complementary. So they might know the business, they've dealt with the business at arm's length on part of a matter, but they can see that bringing that into their fold, their business into their fold, would open up a whole new channel for them.
Yeah.
That's where they see value. Complementary doesn't get a mention here. And this was with these kind of charts where business owners were asked.
So by a complementary business, I guess you're meaning somebody who's maybe got a gap where that your business can fill. Yeah.
Yeah, but then they're not doing the same thing as you,
Yeah.
which a competitor kind of
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
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 And then in turn, again, asking business owners, are you concerned about receiving your desired sale price? Like 78% of them say yes, and the others aren't sure anyway. My question there is, desired price is one thing, but do you even know what the business is worth to even start this thought process?
Yeah.
Because I know every single one of you will tell me this is the price I want, and I will disappoint most of you.
You already have with me a
Unfortunately,
couple of years ago.
unfortunately, right? So understand, I don't even mind that you have a desired price, that's fine, but understand how realistic that is in the market. And if it's not realistic today, how can you get it there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I would like you to hit your desired price, but the assumption that that is straight off the bat is often fraught with a bit of danger. All right, so I'll just do these. So key questions to ask yourselves, actually. When do you want to start from an exit perspective? Who can help you? What are the steps you and your business need to take? And then how will you know the sale's been successful? Especially given the timelines that I alluded to before. All right, any questions at this point?
I've got a whole lot to ask you afterwards. Anybody
The
else?
other thing I would also like to point out is usually when owners are getting excited about selling, or they've woken up in the middle of the night and think that's what I'll do, they get onto Google and off they go, right? Google, let's find out what my business is worth, what's sold, blah, blah, blah. Most of the content that is publicly available is about big deals, not the 93% that I mentioned before. It is not, that information is not readily available. It's confidential. You can't get it. You can only really access it through the likes of ourselves, because we keep our own data and have done for the last 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it really, because often we'll have an owner come to us and say, I saw, an article on this, or press on that, or Google tells me that I should get 45 times whatever, right?
Yeah.
And of course, part of the initial discussion is being able to bring that back into where reality actually sits. So anything that you Google, I humbly request that you take it all with a great big grain of salt. Even the large company transactions that happen that are reported, you don't get any detail, right? They give you a big picture number, but you don't know how much was shares, how much was cash. Like, you have no idea what the detail of that is, which means you don't really know how well the owner is as a result.
Yeah.
Personally. And so you just need to be, very mindful that, and usually, obviously, with the larger businesses, the multiples are higher. Business is a bit interesting insofar as usually as things expand or get bigger, it's almost like there's a volume discount kind of scenario across business generally. But with business sales, the bigger the business is and the more robust it is, the higher the multiple is. I'll talk about multiples in a minute.
Okay.
Because it is a recognition of the size and the robustness of the business is reflected in the multiple. So most business owners find out at sale time, which is what I'm going to try and, we'll cut this off at the pass, is that the business isn't worth as much as what you would like or want.
Mm-hmm.
I've already discussed this unexplored loss of purpose or identity.
Yeah.
The sale process can take longer than intended and can be stressful, especially if you think you can do it on your own. And there are usually restrictions and limitations included in the deal. I rarely see a walk-in, walk-out deal. Right. And the only time I do see a walk-in, walk-out is where it's health related. But the price is discounted accordingly.
Yeah.
All right, so selling your business is likely to be one of the largest transactions you'll ever make, and the one you're probably least prepared for. Because I bet any one of you, if I say to you, what's your house worth, you can tell me in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I ask you about the second largest, first largest asset you've got other than your house.
No idea.
My guess is you can't tell me. And that's your business, right? So that is why this conversation is a really important one to have. All right, so let's talk about how viable your business is. Now, I've spoken about this already. This is the stats from the ABS in regard to 93% businesses that are doing a $2 million or less turnover. That's the majority of Australian business. All the account for any accountants that might be listening to this as well, I'm assuming that it might be what your client list or client mix also looks like. A couple of large ones, a few more middle ones, and a whole lot of small ones.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense. These are our stats in regards to what the number of buyers that we see coming in contacting us on a regular basis. So we would receive anywhere between 2,500 buyer inquiries a month.
Bloody hell. Wow.
Yeah. And that's based on businesses that we have in the market. So we get three, I don't think I've got this here. We get about 350 seller inquiries a month.
Right.
Of those numbers, though, we're lucky to take 20% of those to market.
Hang on a minute. So you've got 350 buyers? No.
350 seller inquiries a month.
And then 2,000 buyers. So there is a big market out there for people who want to buy businesses.
Correct. And I'll show you that it's actually a seller's market at the moment.
Interesting. Okay.
But which is great, and that's what it is, full stop. But they're buying quality.
Yeah.
And they're buying those that are priced right.
Yeah.
To enable a transaction to happen.
And then
but as you can see, it's steadily been building. Now, buyer inquiries have steadily been building, and they were actually they did not stop through COVID.
Yeah, right. Because I'm just looking at that growing and growing and growing, and this is people who are buyers. Interesting.
Yeah.
Lena,
now again, we are a big outfit. We're national. These are combined numbers and all the rest of it. But you know, these are no small numbers, and you can't Google this stuff.
Yeah,
this
right.
is our data. Yeah. And then in terms of businesses in demand and difficult to sell, you can read the list. I don't know where your business fits, but
this is in demand, right? NDA.
Business is in demand. And if you've got an accounting practice, we could sell that tomorrow. Just asking.
What's service 5 days?
Accounting and bookkeeping practices.
What does service 5 days mean?
It's a service business, but only 5 days. So, for example, you might, I don't know, let's say you're cleaning, but you're cleaning a commercial office. So it's only a 5-day-a-week gig as opposed to 7-day-a-week gig.
Right. And online businesses work from home. I think a lot of us would have a business like that. But
if we take a business to market that has the words online, digital, e-com, we are inundated with inquiry.
Wow, interesting.
Now, the business still has to stack up and so forth. But
and you need to be making more than 150 grand profit, or otherwise they're not really interested.
So here's the thing. So that is in regard to that market comes into play when unemployment goes up.
Yeah,
people right. So profits for less than 150 to a working owner, or even less than 200 to a working owner, is deemed job replacement.
Yeah.
Where you have low unemployment, if you wanted to earn that kind of money, there are jobs around to get. Where unemployment goes up and you still want to earn that kind of money, then you need to think about buying the business to be able to earn that money.
Yeah, right.
The one other thing I would point out here is travel agencies. They're in the difficult to sell, but that's been like that for some time through COVID and even a little bit before. I suspect that their travel, it wouldn't surprise me if that shifts a little bit. Yeah. Because if one thing we learned through COVID is all the DIY travelers that did stuff themselves and then got caught really were in trouble as to be able to get themselves back and get in contact with people and all the rest of it. So, and maybe it's more the safer travelers, I'm not sure, but there seems to be a bit of a resurgence about going back to agencies. So you can get somebody
true. Interesting.
out of the dirt if you need to, you know.
Yeah.
But as you can see, most of the difficult to sell are retailers for the most part, high street, shopping centre kind of business.
Yep.
Professional services generally, we have a good inquiry rate on as well.
Okay. All right. There are a couple of questions in here, but shall we wait to the end, or do you want to know them now?
I can go now.
All right. So, well, let me just get the first one. The first one was Carla, who runs the coaching directory, saying, what's the criteria or the potential elements for pricing a small business? I'm guessing you're going to get to that, are you?
Yeah.
Yep. And then Jess is saying, what if you've got 2,000 buyers, what sort of size businesses in general are they looking for?
Yeah. So again, that anything under that 200 profit to a working owner, we're not taking any of those to market for the time being.
Right.
Most of ours will have, or the transaction price will be anywhere from 300-400 up.
Right.
Up to 15 mil transaction.
All
but
right.
we have all sorts.
And then Melissa from Bondi Chai saying, what about food and beverages product businesses when everything is outsourced?
Well, so the thing about what isn't mentioned here for anything to do with food production, food manufacture, well, manufacturing is noted here. Food production, food manufacture, food distribution, they will be in the businesses in demand.
Right, great.
The food businesses that are cafes, restaurants, high street are in the difficult to sell.
Yeah.
But if you produce, especially at scale, if you're producing the stuff, then that's it. Whilst food is the thing, it's
makes sense though.
It's actually about the manufacturing and how it's done and the distribution and all of that.
It makes sense that cafes and things which we all see fall over left, right, and centre are harder to sell than something like Melissa and Martin have built.
Yeah, for the most part, I won't take them on because it's a different type of buyer as well. And most of the buyers in our database, so our database is sitting at about 50,000 buyers now, nationally. They're not looking for cafes, they're looking for quality to be able to buy.
And have they got the money to pay the millions or the...
That is always the $1 million question.
All right.
And that's part of our role, is to determine how likely that is. I'm not sure whether I've got there. Unfortunately, there are a number of people making money out of teaching others how to buy business, no money down.
Yeah, right.
They have to be weeded out.
Yeah.
Because any owner that I know that has gone to market, there's no way, well, we won't tolerate it either. There's no way knowing that there is no skin in the game up front. So, again, that's a wariness on the buy side.
Okay.
Carry on?
Yep, carry on.
All right.
This is fantastic, by the way. Really interesting.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. So things that we look at, basically we look at profit and value, right? Now, what do they mean? Profit means what money you make. Value is what you get to make the money, to use to make the money.
Right.
All right. So I like to summarize it in this kind of thing, where you've got profit and there's good substantial assets that help create the money, and it's not all reliant on the labor of the owner.
Yep.
Top right corner, gold. I can do something with that.
Okay.
Where you've got profit, but the number is all required, basically the profit requires the owner to do all the work. Deadlock.
Right.
Where there's no profit, but there's value, can be regarded more as like a project work insofar as you kind of can be rolled in, rolled out. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. And no value, no profit, dead weight. The ones with no profit, this is where quite a number of the deals I'm doing currently with liquidators.
Right.
And the way the liquidator deals work is obviously they're in liquidation for a reason, right? So let's take financials out of the mix.
Yeah.
We've been really able to help a lot of the liquidators and even get their heads around it, is that we can bundle the intangible assets, the IP assets, the website databases, the intangible assets that can create the revenue.
Right.
Now, how they spend the revenue and end up.
I was going to say, so it's kind of like you're talking about the potential for this business. It's set up, it's ready to go.
Yeah, it's not even about potential. It's actually about people knowing what to do with that asset when they take it on.
Yeah, right.
So is it another way of potential?
There's a bit of matchmaking as well. If you're the right
it may
person.
not necessarily be for like exactly the same as what was being offered. Yeah. But it's in a, that this is where competitors will cherry pick because they can buy the bits they want.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. But we're getting fabulous traction on bundling these IP and digital assets and taking them to market and asking expression of interest, no price guide. We're also doing express sales for business owners that find themselves in all sorts and they want to sell it off before it gets to liquidation. We're helping those out as well. So it's not a sale driven on an asking price and financials. It is a sale driven on bundling of intangible assets and going expression of interest. And we're getting some fabulous results out of those, just saying. So there are different ways to go to market depending on the situation you're in. Obviously, not all businesses are in trouble either, which is a good thing. But another key consideration, though, EBITDA still applies. So if you don't know what EBITDA is, which is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, this is where when we're taking a business, when we're reviewing and appraising a business, we want to bring it to an EBITDA calculation, which is essentially where all costs have been taken out, including a wage to the owner.
Right.
Which then affects profitability, et cetera, right? And most of your larger transactions will only be based on EBITDA. Smaller ones we can do PBITDA, which is proprietor's earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, which is another way of saying profit to a working owner, including wages.
Okay.
Right. But the time of year that we're in, the time of life that we're in, all P&Ls have been impacted by COVID in some way, shape or form. Up, down, sideways, doesn't really matter. They've all been impacted.
Yeah.
We've still got 12 to 18 months for that to roll through. Because when we're looking at the appraisal of a business, we're looking at a good 3 years, if not longer, of P&Ls, of financials. That said,
what about if the business is younger than that? Oh, sorry.
So I'll come back to that. So buyers at the moment, given the COVID years, are even just wanting to look at 22 and 23 and half of 24, because even 22's got half COVID in it, especially if you're Melbourne based, right?
Yeah.
So, but regardless of what happened pre-COVID, it's almost like that doesn't matter, because if the business hasn't bounced back or whatever reason, the P&Ls look different to what they did before, whether that be better or worse, it actually doesn't matter. What happened prior to COVID is a bit irrelevant now, because the longer we get away from that, the less relevance it has. So they're only really looking at 22, 23 and half of 24. For businesses that are younger than that, that's actually, so far, I had a conversation with someone yesterday, they didn't have a full 12 months of financials, but they wanted to go to market. It's really hard to put a price on that.
Yeah.
Because there's no history, like there's nothing to use, really. So my suggestion was that depending on what assets she had, we could maybe bundle up the assets, but we'll see what happens with her. But this is still a consideration, and I'll only be talking about this for another 12 months. Right.
Yeah, right.
And then, but when we're pricing a business, we're looking at three things: profitability, quality and risk, and what the market's telling us.
Yeah.
Now, key question this is where Googling things and all that comes into play, because and can be misleading. Because when we're talking about profits, we're actually asked which profit. What I mean by that is, I've already mentioned a few. You've got EBITDA and you've got PBITDA, right? There's two.
Yeah.
Then you've got EBITDA last year, PBITDA last year, or EBITDA average, PBITDA average. That's 6 different numbers.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a key, which profit makes the most sense based on the industry, the business type, how big it is, who's going to look at it, et cetera, right? That's where our experience comes into play. The next question then is, so if you hear of, I mean, for the most part, taking asset sales out of the mix, for the most part, it's a straight calculation. A profit times a multiple equals a price, right?
Yep.
Profits I've already spoken about. We have to determine which profit to use. Multiple then is we also need to determine which multiple to use. Multiples are driven by the same thing, industry, size, location. A lot of the intangible value and the goodwill value, the intangible value sits in the multiple.
Well, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So profit times a multiple gives us the answer, but it is influenced by market evidence. And this is the point I was making before. If you want to sell the business, if it comes out, I've Googled it and I think I should be able to sell it for 6 times. What does that even mean? 6 times what? Right.
Yeah.
And what is that based on? Well, I saw a very large company in America that sold it 6 times and surely not relevant. That is not market-based evidence that can be found here.
Right.
And that the culmination of these 3 things is vital in getting the pricing right.
In terms of multiples, I know it's how long is a piece of string, but is there sort of an average that, because I know people talk with online businesses about it being huge numbers of multiples, and again, probably on Google, but I want to talk to somebody who actually knows. Is it normally roughly 2 or 3 times, or is it like 10 or 12 times, or is it like 20?
So you're 93%.
Yep.
EBITDA, the highest will be 3s.
Right. So it's 2s or 3s, really.
PBITDA, 1.5 to 2.
Okay.
That's in your 93%, right?
Yep.
Now you go up from there. As the business increases, as the value increases, as the footprint increases, the multiple can shift from there.
Okay.
Sometimes, not always, but sometimes.
Yeah.
And how in demand it is. See, the thing about, and again, online can be a little bit misleading. Well, not misleading, but it's not necessarily a straight comparison.
No.
Because often online talk about very high multiples, but that's because they're working on monthly profit.
Yeah.
Right? Monthly
All
profit.
right.
And then they use the term SDE, which is an American term, which is essentially profit to a working owner. You'll find a lot of online businesses are based on profit to a working owner with not a lot of expenses in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, it's understanding this. So an online business may very well be a multiple of 12s and 24s, but they are months.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right, which is essentially a 1 to 2 year same
thing.
Same thing. Just it's presented differently.
Makes sense. If anybody else has any questions, just either interrupt or
Yeah, please
post
do.
it. But it's going to be a juicy conversation at the end of this, that's for sure.
Excellent. Right. So now I'm just going to run through a whole heap of questions around viability. And I'm happy to send these questions to you.
That'd be great.
But these are the kind of things that from an owner's perspective, you want to start considering, right? Some of these I've already addressed, so we'll come back to, but fundamentally, is the business making money? That's always a good place to start. Is it profitable? Do you know what the business break even is? The number of business owners that can't answer that, I find interesting. is the business paying you a market rate salary? So let me back that up a little bit. The difference between an EBITDA and a PBITDA is a market rate salary to replace the business owner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're not paying yourself a market rate salary, and then you're saying that the profit is a whole lot bigger than it is, this is where the reduction in profitability comes in, and this is where the disappointment in pricing comes in. Yeah. Is the family reliant on the cash flow? We've already talked about this, how you're going to replace it.
Yep.
Are you tipping extra money into the business? This is a big one here about, you know, sometimes business time, they want to sell and everything's great, but when you find out a bit later on that maybe they were topping it up a little bit, that's always, that's a red flag from
Is it a red flag if you're reinvesting any of the profit back into the business that way?
Reinvesting is a different reason,
Yep,
but this is actually about keeping it afloat.
Taking your savings and, okay.
Yeah. What is the business revenue model?
Yeah.
You need to be able, that needs to be as crystal clear as possible. How do you make your money? Is it set up for recurring subscription revenue? Can it be? There isn't, most industries, most business can come up with some form of a recurring subscription revenue model. Yeah. Whether they do or don't is another thing. If they don't, but it's possible, that can be a reason to buy. Not what to pay, but reason to buy.
Yeah.
Is the industry in demand? We've talked about that. Is the business sustainable? Steady flow of new customers. Now, what we find with this is that, you know, there can be businesses that are quite old. You know, they've been around a long time, and they've had, you know, great customers have been with them a long time. But the key from a buyer's point of view is, where are new customers coming in as well, and where are they coming from, and how sustainable is that? Yeah. This is a key for professional services, especially the likes of an accounting practice, for example, because often what we're finding with older accountants who are now talking about getting out, often their clients are a similar age. Right. Because they started and then someone took a punt on them, and they, you know, that mix seems to be a similar demographic. And of course, if the accountant wants to retire, is it at age that they want to retire? Does this mean that half their client mix is going to fall off as well? Yeah. So you want to know that there's new clients coming in, and there's new younger demographics constantly flowing in as well, just to use it as an example. How much upside is still left? So really, you know, from a buyer's perspective, what can still be done with it, or is it in a saturated market? There's not much else that can be done, and why would I bother? To continue, can you take 90 days off for a holiday and the business makes money? Well, that's a good one. That then goes to the whole, so magic words when taking a business to market are words like under management. Now, most owners, even larger businesses, they're not completely under management insofar as they will still oversee the financials, which we completely get, right? But day-to-day operationally, where it can be under management is actually very useful, because then we can, from a saleability point of view, the idea being that the management would then go with the sale, which would then take pressure off you having to go with the sale as the owner. Yeah. Because the management that knows stuff are going with the sale and you don't have to. Are there systems in place to replace you? What makes your business special? Can the model be leveraged? Is it recognised as an industry leader? Are the business financial statements clean and clear? What do we mean by that is no personal stuff in there. Yeah, right. There are only, I can make adjustments to bring it to what is called a normalised profit or the EBITDA. But if you and your accountant have done some creative accounting and you've heavily disguised an expense as whatever it is, but it was actually personal, if it doesn't make sense, we can't adjust that out. Yeah. So either don't do it by all means, but don't do it for the 3 years that I need the financials to do the final pricing, which is what this whole clean and clear is about. Are there agreements with key suppliers? Is there a large concentration of business with one customer? Interesting, that one, buyers can look at that one of two ways. If a business is of size or has a particular unique offering, if they want to grow, they actually have to end up with, let's say, the large retailers or the large supermarket chains. Because that's kind of, if you're going to keep growing, that's kind of where you have to end up, right? For the distribution and the volume and the size. However, what they typically then do is become a very large customer in the mix.
Yeah.
Buyers will either view that as a fabulous way to then get into that retailer, let's say, because they haven't been able to get in themselves, and they'll see it as an opportunity. Other people will look at it and think, nah, because if they go, I lose 70% of the business.
Yeah.
So what am I paying for, right? So again, there's considerations in that. Is there dependence on key persons with special skills? Often that's the owner. If it's not the owner, it's the under management people. From a saleability point of view, you know, sometimes there is a conversation to be had there about giving them the owner to provide an incentive to the management to stay with the sale. By the same token too, you've then got a flag that you've got the business on the market. So there's timing around when that conversation happens as well. Is there provable customer satisfaction? The fact that a customer is a repeat customer is not necessarily means that they'll keep coming back.
Yeah.
So that's about, you know, net promoter scores or surveys or, you know, why do you stay? You know, what do you know about your customer? Really, that's about the relationship that the company, not you as the owner, but the company, the business, has with your customers. What is the business reputation online? So I have had meetings cancelled where prospective buyers have done their own research by Googling and found dirt somewhere along the line, somewhere way back, and cancelled the meeting and didn't want to proceed.
Yeah.
So that whole reputation thing, like I encourage you, how many of you actually go Google your business name and your personal name every 6 months? Because if you don't, start doing it. Because what you want to know that there's nothing there, firstly, but if there is something there, you want to know about that and know how to address it.
Yeah.
But you've got to actually go do it, unless somebody happens to come across it and say, oh, by the way, and you don't want that either. Yes, I'm well aware of it. I'm on top of it. This is what we've done. This is how we're addressing it. All right, last round. Management structure. Is it all about you? I've talked about that. Levels of stock. This is a big one. So sometimes there is a discussion about buying extra stock to keep your profit down, which doesn't actually help, because keeping your profit down is one thing, but if the stock becomes old and you can't actually move it, that's not helping.
Yeah.
The key thing about levels of stock is that from a buyer's perspective, they're only really interested in stock that lasts, that is, 12 months old. I mean, they'll have an understanding of what churns through your business, but anything that's older than, if you've got stock that's old and it just doesn't move, they won't pay for that.
Yeah.
So you need to be mindful of that. You also need to know you'll end up with that stock. You also need to be mindful about, okay, well, I'll just sell it on eBay, but then what you're doing is potentially flooding your market, selling off stuff cheap, which actually won't help you or your client when they take it over.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of considerations around stock. Length of premise. So pre-COVID, actually well before COVID, especially if location matters.
Yeah.
The length of the lease was really important. Now, Not so much now, but certainly the first 12 months off the back of COVID, this was a really contentious point because buyers believed that there was a pre-COVID rent and a post-COVID rent. So they didn't want to be locked in on pre-COVID rents if they thought they could get it cheaper post-COVID.
Right.
That's balanced out now. And in some, in cases where pre-COVID rent is aligning, it's probably better.
I was going to say, I would have thought it would be the other way around. It'd be cheaper before.
It is now, but it wasn't
You didn't
for the
used to
first
be.
12 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it really, if location matters, length of, options and how long you can actually have that property for factors into how buyable that is from a buyer's perspective.
Yeah.
Landlord expectations on assignment of lease. So we're finding landlords are asking all sorts of things. So there's a transfer is one thing, a lease assignment is one thing, but you have to be aware that, look, we've even had one instance where they were asking for 18 months of monthly rent as a bond.
Yeah, right.
That's ridiculous.
Commercial landlords are bastards.
Ridiculous amount of time. But by the same token too, so you need to actually it's a tricky thing to do because you don't want to, alert the landlord to your intentions perhaps. But you do need to understand what their expectations are, because if you really like the buyer, but they can't get past the landlord if the lease is important, then the deal won't go through.
Yeah, right.
Are you okay with restraint of trade? So every contract of sale will have a restraint of trade in it. Usually it's 3 years, and usually there's an element of geographical constraints in that as well, which can be Australia.
Yeah.
Key thing about restraint of trade though is they can't stop you making money. If that's your craft, if that's your trade, you still can do the work. You just can't build a business that you've equivalent to what you've just sold.
Yeah.
So there is some diplomacy around the restraint of trade.
Yeah.
Can you afford to sell? We've discussed that. Is the tax man coming? That's a liquidated question. Do you want the business to continue? We've talked about that. Does it need to continue? We've talked about that. Can the business operate without you? And are you prepared to offer vendor finance? So if you were to sell tomorrow, most businesses that we're selling at the moment has some kind of deal structuring in it.
Can you just give us an example? Yeah, what do you mean?
Yeah. Meaning, especially with professional services. So there's a couple of things around that. Bank lending is difficult on a cash flow lend. So if you want to buy the business, but you want to use the business to get the lending, not provide your own security, that is called a cash flow lend. From what I understand, the most banks will lend is 50% on a cash flow lend.
Right. So when vendor financing, you're saying
as a buyer. If as a buyer, you don't have the full amount, but the owner, both parties want the deal to happen, but the purchaser doesn't have the full amount, then there's a discussion to be had about vendor finance, which basically means that the seller is acting as bank for the balance of the monies.
So it could be paid out over, you pay me every quarter for the next 3 years, or
there'll be a payment plan,
whatever it is. Yeah.
There'll be a security required, possibly a caveat, depending on what it is. So it's treated as a loan. So there will have to be
interest,
the usual criteria of security put in place, regardless of whether it's bank or vendor. Yeah. So you have to be okay about that. But we're seeing more and more of this deal structuring happening. Now, vendor finance is different to earn-out. I don't know if you've heard of the term earn-out, but typically earn-out, as I understand it, is based on performance. So you will get monthly, quarterly repayments as long as you maintain X.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha.
Drop down, it drops down, blah, blah, blah. Nobody likes earn-outs other than buyers.
Okay.
The vendor doesn't like it. We don't like it. No one likes earn-out. So we trying to steer clear of earn-outs where possible. Vendor finance is different to that. Vendor finance is a loan.
Right.
and treat it as a
So
loan.
for instance, Zoe would,
Fixed repayments regardless of performance.
so Hamish and Andy, their Hamish wife, Zoe, whatever her name is, who sold
Yeah.
that amazing deal for 189 million and got, 100 up front, and then was supposed to get the 90 the second time, and they went into administration. That's kind of vendor finance, is it? That's her agreeing to pay me another lump sum later.
No, that's not, because she got the business back. She
Yeah, well,
kept
she
her
bought
100 and
it
got the
back.
business back.
But that's
So she
presumably
didn't.
because they couldn't pay that second payment.
No, they didn't. But she got the 100 and got the business back, so she could do it all over again.
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
it hadn't gone. But in terms of the initial agreement, would have been to structure it as two payments or whatever.
They're too big. There would have been a whole lot of other terms and conditions in there as well.
Okay.
My
That's
guess
not a
it was
good
probably
example.
on trading and the like. Where I doubt whether she would have been able to back a $90 million loan
Yeah.
in an
No,
odd
I'm just
cycle,
saying
right?
that if they were going to pay her out, they said, well, we'll pay you in two payments over 2 years or whatever, and didn't manage to do the second one. And there was probably some clause that said, if you don't pay it, it comes back to me.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
Contractually, that is how that is covered off.
Yeah.
Now, most owners don't want it back because who knows what damage has been done in the time
In the
that the
meantime, yeah.
purchasers had it. But nonetheless,
My brother sold a big trade show for I don't know how many million, and they bought it. So it's a big in-person beer trade show, and they got paid half the money up front, and then the company had to pay them the second one 2 years later, and their first payment was October 2019 or something. So this company then had to pay for a trade show that hadn't been able to happen for 2 years.
no.
But
Did they get the
I think
money?
the contract was there and they had to pay it, and that was
They had to pay it, and this is and that. So that's a form of almost a form of vendor finance as well, and the contract would have covered that off. Yeah, the timing
interesting.
on that is particularly unfortunate.
No, I couldn't believe it. But anyway, it was, and I'd say Zoe, whatever her name, had a bit of that as well, probably happening.
Oh yeah, no question. All right, so scorecard. Okay, let me explain to you what I mean by scorecard. I mean, essentially, your scorecard is your P&L.
Yeah.
A business owner's scorecard is their P&L. What I mean by that is this. You have a whole set of assets, you're doing a whole lot of activity and so forth, but the way that the value and the value on how well those assets are performing is indicated in the profit and loss.
Yeah.
If you don't like profit and loss, if you don't like reading financial statements and all of that stuff, you have to change. If you want to build a business into an asset to sell, you need to know those P&Ls intimately, because they are what your profit number is based on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in terms of where you're at around what level you might be at in terms of your business and what you should be concentrating on, this is just a general gauge. But essentially, if the profit number, if you're not making a profit, you're actually still working out your model.
Yeah.
And then if you're starting to make a profit, you are testing the model, locking and loading it, right?
Yep.
And it takes a good 3 years to work this out. Because what often happens is the business that ends up making the money is an unidentical twin to what you thought you were building. Because you start with something, you get feedback from the market, you follow the money.
Yeah.
Right? Which is why you end up with an unidentical twin, because you follow the money, because the money will tell you what the market will spend its money on.
Yeah.
Right? And then if you've got a 25K profit, you're then upping the ante on the activity within that model that you've now worked out, et cetera, right? At a 50K profit, you're now establishing an identity. At 100K profit, you've got boundaries, you know where you'll play, where you won't play, you've worked that out. And then at a 250K profit, that means that there should be independence for the owner from the business at that point, and
Yeah.
then it all goes from there.
Cool.
This is a scorecard that I also use that I put together years ago, but essentially it was about addressing all those questions that I asked previously and putting a score on it.
Yeah.
And then really enabling you to come up with what a score is. And then, you know, if you're all in your ones and twos, you've got a bit of work to do. If it is, you want to build an asset to sell. Yeah. I'm happy to share this as well. Just to finish off, you know, you don't want to do the business owner lament where, you know, you wished everything else had happened and of course nothing did, and then you can't sell it and no one wants it, and you don't want to get there. You know, you want to start this this work. It's work that should really be running simultaneously with all your day-to-day stuff, but it's a filter you see life through as an owner.
Yeah.
And that's it from me. That's it from me.
Wow. That is amazing. Now, I'm going to, let's just open it up to everyone. As we're talking about money, I might just stop the recording now so that people can speak freely and there's nothing there. So just hold on a tick.